The next speaker is Sarah Durant, and a heartfelt thanks from me, because she stepped in at very short notice and worked through the night, I think. Sarah's a professional consultant and coach, and during this conference I was struck by the fact that we've heard a lot about change and disruption and experimentation, and I thought it was appropriate that we could actually end the conference thinking about how that affects the people and teams involved, so from the human side. So I'd like to hear from Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ross, and thanks to all of you for showing your resilience in staying to the bitter end, hopefully not too bitter. It's lovely to have this opportunity actually to talk to you. My topic is a quote from the poet Maya Angelou, "Surviving is important, thriving is elegant." And what I love about that is it speaks to something really important, close to my heart. This is my 24th year in the industry. I've done all sorts of different things in my time. One of the things that really strikes me, and has struck me a lot recently, in recent years, is we all know about how much change and disruption and uncertainty and challenge there is in our sector. And we spend a huge amount of time, quite rightly, we're technology-led, we're technology-driven, we spend a huge amount of time in our sector on what I call the doing, the stuff that's out there, the business processes, the project management, the skills we need, the technology, the mergers, the acquisitions, the whatnot. That's absolutely fine, as I say, absolutely we should do. What I notice is we don't spend very much time at all on what I call the being. So how are we as human beings in all this change, all this uncertainty, and opportunity as well? So I want to just spend a little time now talking about resilience, this quality that we all have, the quality that enables us to manage well this period of change and disruption. And by the way, it's not going away for sure. So I'll just share with you, I've got two goals, modest goals for this talk, just to raise awareness of this quality of resilience and as a capacity that we all have, and provide some sort of insight into how, if we cultivate that capacity and spend some time on the being side of things, it will benefit us as individuals, both at work and in our wider lives, our teams, and also the organisations that we work for. So I'll just give us a little map as to where we're going today. It's possible I may not have time for all of this. We'll see how we go. So I'll give you a definition of resilience, or some definitions. I'm sure you've got some sense of it yourself, but just so we're all sort of pretty much on the same page before we get going. Talk a little bit about context, why it's kind of struck me now and recently that it might be quite useful to talk about resilience. And because we're a scholarly lot, some tales from the evidence base as to what resilience can do for us. As I say, if there's time, I'll illustrate that further using a case study and then summarize, and hopefully there'll be some time for questions if you have any, or points that you want to make. So starting off with this definition of resilience, I've got 4 here. There are others. I guess what I want to draw attention to really is a couple of things. Resilience, our ability to recover from or adjust to misfortune or change. Well, as we all know, life isn't perfect and we're all subject to adversity. So it's our ability to recover and work well with that. I also like this idea of remaining creative and flexible. Resilience is something that enables us to remain engaged rather than to kind of close down. And also to generate supportive behaviours. Historically, I've been one of those people who, when I'm under pressure, when I'm under stress, I tend to kind of narrow down, close down. And one of the things that my own resilience training has kind of helped me do is actually open out under times of pressure and connect with friends and colleagues. And I've found that incredibly useful. It's not rocket science, it might be natural to some of you. That's been a real lesson for me. And also this last one, quite important, the ability, the capacity to bounce back from stress and adversity and take on new challenges. Again, the evidence base shows that when we're under pressure as human beings, we tend to take far fewer risks. We become very, very risk averse. That doesn't necessarily make us wrong. It probably makes us, in evolutionary terms, quite sensible. If we've got too much going on, it really doesn't make sense to take on more. But you scale that up into teams, you scale that up into organizations, and you're in a lot of trouble in a dynamic environment like ours. If you've got risk-averse culture going on, for all sorts of understandable reasons, that's something that sensible organizations need to be addressing. And they can do that by cultivating resilience in their people. I also think it's important to say what resilience is not. It's not keeping going at all costs. Resilience isn't something where you tool up and you turn into Arnie, okay? Nor is it ignoring the difficult. It's not a little sugarcoating on the things that are going horribly wrong and a rictus grin and staying positive. It absolutely isn't. It's certainly not irritating platitudes of the life gave me lemons so I made lemonade variety. And nor is it complacency around stress. I gave a similar talk about a month ago at the ER&L event in Austin, Texas. And the Twitter feedback, some of it after that, was, hang on, isn't this resilience thing just kind of writing a blank check to organizations to keep piling on the stress? Absolutely not. Resilience is about tooling us up and strengthening our capabilities, but it's not either or, it's both and. There still has to be an open dialogue within organizations about the pressure that we're bringing to bear on our people and being realistic about what we can expect people to cope and deal with. So I said a little bit of context. Why now with resilience? No one in this space needs me to tell you how dynamic our sector is, how much change is going on. I have to say, my sense is in the last couple of years, it really has ramped up again. There's so much experimentation out there, so many pilots, so many kind of unknowns. And that's kind of exciting, right? Lots of opportunity. It can be really stimulating and fun and gets you out of bed in the morning. It's a great sector to work in. It can also be a bit frustrating sometimes. Maybe we have this sense that we don't quite have enough time to consolidate, to stay still for a minute, and just to really gather our thoughts and make a measured and mindful next step. And it also can get ugly. And we need to name it, we need to talk about it, a lot more than we do. I have friends who work in organizations where the HR people think it's really, really normal that people are on antidepressants because of work pressure. I don't think it's really, really normal. I think it's appalling. And I think we need to take responsibility for it. What I won't do, by the way, is carry on with all this doom-laden stuff for too much longer. I do want to send you off with a spring in your step. There is a message of hope here. Stay with me. But we do have to kind of go through it to get to the other side. So some data about stress. None of this will surprise you. I just think it's kind of depressing. It's not anything we can be proud of as a nation. I think it's very good that we have the conversation. What I get a little tired of is seeing on the BBC these kind of stats and absolutely nothing to help you with how to deal with it. Maybe a link to NHS Direct and then drugs and Big Pharma. Hooray. Situation isn't any better, I don't think, in lots of other countries, certainly not in North America. After I spoke at Austin, I had a little survey monkey going and I asked the colleagues there to contribute, if they would, as to the things that they saw as being adversities at this time, and these are some examples. And again, I don't necessarily propose to go through them, I'm just assuming these things are familiar to you, maybe you could add a whole bunch more. But really, it's to show you how universal change is, and you know, to the fine degree, and also the bigger picture. I said we were going to have to go through it to get to the other side. This is a bit of a dismal slide. I don't like being left alone with this slide. Stress responses, particularly over long periods of time. Human beings are evolved, like most mammals, for short, sharp periods of stress. Yeah? We fight, flight, or fright, or freeze. Actually, what we find in work environments and generally in wider life sometimes is what I call the low-level hum of stress. This kind of ubiquitous low level of pressure and uncertainty that sometimes pervades modern workplaces, and we are extremely poorly adapted for that. That is not how our brains, that's not how our evolution has adapted us. And that is why we get into trouble, or partly why we get into trouble. And it impacts all of these areas. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not want to come into work feeling angry. And I don't want to come into work feeling mistrustful, particularly as I work for myself. I've already had to discipline myself twice this year. No, and this idea of heroic overwork, by the way, I'm not making us wrong in this. I'm really not. This isn't about pointing to ourselves and saying, come on, buck up. Far from it. There's nothing wrong about these things. They're just not terribly helpful. They're extremely human, but they're not terribly helpful. And they're the places we go to when we're under pressure. I'm guessing if we did a straw poll, there isn't a person in this room who doesn't know everything on this slide, either from their own direct experience or experience of people around them. And none of us want to see more of this stuff. But I wonder how much we're doing to alleviate the suffering. So who's having a jolly time? So, okay, the message of hope. How can resilience help? Well, I want to tip my virtual hat right now to a guy called Martin Seligman and his colleagues. He works out of Penn State in the US. I'd seriously recommend, he does a mean TED talk. He used to be president of the American Psychological Association. He and his team at Penn, it's also, to be fair, there are other research teams around the world as well. There's about a 30-year evidence base now around resilience and what Martin Seligman calls positive psychology. And some of the results are really, really encouraging, that people who go through this resilience training, it has quite different forms at the moment. You can do like a master's in this stuff, but you can also do short courses. It's shown to have a really positive impact on organizations, as we see here, also on teams. And again, I won't necessarily dwell on all of this stuff, but if you're one of those people, and again, I don't mean to make you wrong, but you know, sometimes people kind of like, you know what, I don't care about the touchy-feely stuff, I just want the numbers to work. Well, it kind of helps that along as well. If you're really not into the personal or personnel development side of it, you can't argue with your salespeople being 37% more effective and your negotiators getting better deals. For individuals, I've divided this out into what I call performance, so how we are at work. Again, hands up who wouldn't want more of these qualities. The one I really want to pick on, I mean, we could spend some time on all of them, but time is a wee bit short. So this unafraid to fail, I think, particularly for the people in this room, and myself included, is a really, really important thing. Yeah? We cannot afford to be afraid to fail in this room, in the organizations that we're in. We need to be able to take risks. We need to not have a blame culture when things don't go quite according to plan, or if the wheels come off completely. We need to be able to learn from the mistakes we make, get up, and keep moving once we've kind of, you know, learnt properly. What we don't want to be doing is being risk averse, because you know what? Someone's going to flood into that space, and then you're really going to need resilience, because you're going to be looking for another job, or I'm going to be looking for another job. On the well-being side, again, fantastic results that Seligman and his team have found from people with resilience training. But a couple of, if you like, outriders in here. I get better physical and mental health. That seems like a great outcome, but perhaps one that one would expect. But higher salaries? Who knew? Longer lifespan. This is pretty big stuff. So pretty cool, huh? And there's more good news. There isn't such a thing. You sometimes read in the literature about the resilient people. Like they're this whole other species, you know, and it's like occasionally we get to touch the hem of their garment as they walk past. Everyone in this room is a resilient person, yeah? As a species, we're resilient, but particularly in this industry, the people in this room, we are resilient. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. We'd be working someplace else. Because this, if nothing else, as I said at the start, this is a dynamic industry. You need resilience. But it's a quality and a capacity we can become more aware of. It's something we can cultivate. Maybe that we have resilient strengths and areas that are less strong. And that's kind of what the training seeks to address. So, how am I doing for time, Ross, please? Yeah, okay. So I just want to take you through very quickly a case study that I hope illustrates something of what I'm talking about, because I'm aware that it's somewhat theoretical at this point. So I want to talk about some of the qualities within resilience that maybe you can identify with, and hopefully it'll put a little flesh on the bones. So this is a case study that was done, a 12-year longitudinal study that was done over the late part of the 70s and into the 80s by a couple called Kabatha and Muddy. They looked at the Illinois Bell Telephone Company, which was part of, I think, part of the US monopoly at the time. And this was at the time when the monopoly was deregulated and all the companies kind of were forced to split up. It's still seen as one of the largest upheavals in corporate history in any country. And Illinois Bell went from 26,000 employees in 1981 to 14,000 in 82. So by anyone's standards, some pretty major change. And the study looked at a cohort of 400 folk working for IBT to see how they dealt with that period of change. And by the way, the deregulation was not anything that the researchers foresaw. They decided to do this 12-year study, and smack bang in the middle of it, it was all change on a massive scale. So it was a dream come true for them. In terms of having a look at how people deal with change. The findings are really interesting. Approximately 2/3 of the folk did poorly with the change. And again, I'm not making these people wrong. It's not about that. It's just saying they didn't deal so well with the change. And the researchers call that a significant wellness breakdown. And that manifests in all sorts of ways, from perhaps the predictable, like absenteeism, through to perhaps the less expected, such as acts of violence in the workplace, divorce, poor health, even suicide. So this is pretty serious stuff. On the other hand, approximately 1/3 of that cohort not only maintained their health and performance, but actually did better through that period, which I find staggering. There was one guy in the results who said he had 10 different bosses in 12 months. So a fair amount of adjusting to get on with there by anyone's standard. And these people also had better health and well-being as well. So this is really interesting. And you want to ask yourself, well, what's going on? Why is that? And the findings were these, that the more resilient cohort had powerful attitudes and beliefs about themselves and the world, and the interaction between those two. And really a lot of kind of resilience work kind of boils down to cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness, yeah? Understanding what's going on inside you when you respond to adversity, and just checking in with yourself and finding out, am I actually telling the right story about this here? Is there a more resilient story I can tell myself? And there are all sorts of tools and models to help us do that. So the researchers kind of categorize these qualities into what they call the 3 C's, and I'll just take us a little bit of a whistle-stop ride through this, so I apologize in advance. But they came up with the 3 C's, challenge, control, and commitment. Now, I think possibly it's not really for me to challenge them, but I would say maybe commitment is more like connection. And I'm just going to look at some of those in detail. By the way, if you want to do something resilient right now, or after this, download that Needs More Shatner and have it as your desktop, okay? Somehow it just works. So those in the resilient cohort were capable of this quality of what they're calling challenge. They saw the difficulties and the setbacks as something like bring it on, yeah? They're not threats or paralyzing events. It was like, it wasn't the kind of classic rabbit in the headlights, oh my God, this is happening to me. It was more like kind of walking into it, stepping into it and saying, let's be positive, let's see where this leads. And importantly, viewing any failures or mistakes or any point where the wheels come off as opportunities to learn rather than as any kind of reflection on their, for example, self-worth or their ability to do their work. Under control, The resilient or more resilient third focused time and energy on events that they could control. And even when none were apparent, they would seek out things that they could control rather than, for example, spending hours around the water cooler gossiping about how, everything's gone to the wall. And this was shown to focus your efforts where you have the most impact, surprise, surprise. It maintains and retains your sense of engagement and meaning, and tends to lead to more positive choices and outcomes. And this one, I really like this one. I think it's really important. That people who've got a high developed resilience, quality of resilience, remain committed and motivated to the processes that are going on around them, but also they stay connected to people and resources that can help them. It needn't always necessarily be people, by the way. It could be books, it could be YouTube videos, it could just be things that help them stay buoyant and focused and engaged. And it was found also, incidentally, that they happen to be really committed in other parts of their lives as well, in the areas that I've noted. I mean, there's lots more we could say about this. I sort of find it fascinating, but these are the kind of qualities that people exude. So as I say, resilience, you might say to yourself, well, that's all very well for those people, but I'm not sure where I am with any of those qualities. And resilience training really, in my experience of it, is that it just raises your awareness of what your habitual thoughts and behaviors are, and just gets you to question those. And are they really serving you? Are they really going to get the best outcomes for you? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. And it can be really healthy to challenge our habitual thoughts, behaviors and beliefs with a view to better outcomes. And as I say, there's all sorts of tools and models that the evidence base is throwing forward now for us to work with. And you remember that slide earlier that was kind of a little dismal and a bit of a downer? Well, this is the way things go when we're feeling more resilient. It doesn't turn on a dime. It's not like we suddenly become resilient and all of these things are available to us. It's more like a direction of travel. It's more like a process, okay? I can speak for myself. I'm 48 years old, so I've got 48 years of habit to undo, if you will, before I can start really, really working on my resilience. But I can tell you from the training that I've done and the coaching that I've done, I found it incredibly helpful, incredibly helpful. I don't know what the word is, blow my own trumpet, but there's a version of me, Sarah 1.0, who would never have volunteered to fill in a plenary gap at a UKSG conference, okay? So maybe a little bit of modeling resilience there. So I'll just wrap it up. Change is the only constant in our sector, and really in life, actually. You don't have to be a Buddhist to believe that, but if you look around, there's just change everywhere. It can be fantastic. It can be really invigorating and stimulating and engaging. We're smart people. It's what we like. But it can cause us challenge and stress, and it impacts our performance and our well-being. And as I say, that would be kind of gloomy if we didn't have this idea that we could do something about it and really step in. I think a lot of this is about becoming a leader of yourself and stopping the script that says it's all about other people, it's all about out there. This is about stepping into your own sense of leading yourself in your own life and taking responsibility and empowering yourself. It's incredibly empowering. So these are the reasons, or some of the reasons, that I engage with this stuff. I'm really, these days, a learning facilitator, a trainer, coach. I'm really interested in individuals, in teams, in organizations, developing themselves to their best abilities in service of all of those, in service of the individuals, the teams, and the outcomes for the organizations as well. A little plugette. I shall keep it brief. If you're interested, I've developed a course called Forever Changes workshop to help use some of these tools and models to build resilience. I'd also love it if you would contribute to the discussion. There's the SurveyMonkey URL there. If you want to contribute to the discussion, anything you put in will remain confidential. Thank you very much for being resilient yourself and staying till the end, and also for this opportunity to share some of this information with you. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.